Hello to the bereaved families of Ontario, Ottawa chapter. We wish we could be with you in person, but these are the times in which we live.
Even though we're thousands of kilometers away at our home in Winnipeg, trust me when I say we feel your pain. As we are all members of a club, we would give anything not to be in. And we hope the story we tell you this afternoon will give you hope. Hope that you can find your place, give voice to your grief if that's what you choose to do. Take that pain and turn it into something good. It is the story of the life and death of our beautiful firstborn son, Bruce.
When you set out as a young couple to get married and start a family, you never imagined your life would turn out this way. We are just an ordinary family like all of you, and if it can happen to us, it can happen to anyone.
Bruce died on March 28, 2011 of a heroin overdose in Calgary. On the plane, on the way to get him, we wrote his obituary. And Darcy and I were resolute in our belief there was no shame in what had claimed Bruce's life because addiction is a disease, and so our decision was to not hide behind it. As a result, the first line of his obituary reads, "Tragically, Bruce Oake lost his battle with addiction at the tender age of 25. That really was the start of a lofty project that we'll explain to you in a few moments. But first, when we tell Bruce's story, we want you to know all about him, that he was a kid like any other with hopes and dreams and a lot of talent. On the weekend after his passing, my colleagues at Hockey Night in Canada prepared a beautiful tribute to Bruce, and we want to share a portion of it with you because Ron McLean tells a wonderful story about our firstborn son, and you get to see him at his precocious best.
Welcome. Just before we combine our voices to tell the story of a big night in the NHL and Hockey Night in Canada, a word about our dear friend Scott Oake's son, Bruce. Bruce died this week at the tender age of 25. Scott's home now with Anne, his wife, and their son, Darcy. Bruce had so many dear friends at Simon House, a facility you can support in honor of Bruce, at King of the Dot Entertainment, where the finest hip-hop rappers in the land square off. He worked and starred there. In sports, he was a Canada Games boxer. Back in 1996, Scott Oake could not even attend the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame induction ceremony in his honor because he was on assignment for the CBC. And young Bruce, as he always did, stepped up.
Even though I'm only 10 years old, I understand the meaning of this honor. That anyone from our family should be put into the Hall of Fame just for talking makes perfect sense.
They may forget what you said, but never how you made them feel, Bruce. Tonight's telecast is dedicated to Bruce Oake.
We practiced his speech for hours, and he delivered it perfectly. Not a lot of 10-year-olds can get up in front of a crowd of 300 and speak with such confidence. And he was such a good baby. In fact, when I returned to work after my maternity leave, I barely got to see him. He went to bed at 6 at night, and I had to wake him up in the morning to either say goodbye or to take him to the sitter. So after about 6 months, I quit my job to stay home with him.
A quick story about Bruce's precociousness. At the age of 3.5, we were in front of the house playing street hockey, and like any father, I was giving him a litany of instructions. This is how you pass, this is how you shoot, this is how you stick handle. And pretty soon he'd had it with me. He stopped cold, looked up at me and said, "You know, Dad, if you know so much about it, you should be playing it, not just talking about it." So at the age of 3.5, he had already figured out his father was nothing more than a professional gas bag.
Bruce struggled to fit in at school, and we did what any parents would do when your child is having trouble. We took him to so many doctors and psychologists, and they quickly diagnosed him with ADHD and a mild form of Tourette's. The Tourette's he either learned to control or he grew out of. We were never sure which. But for most of his school life, he was on some kind of medication.
Bruce had a couple of serious passions, boxing and rap music. I think he was drawn to boxing because he had seen me cover it at a couple of Olympic Games. He did, though, make one classic error of judgment. He thought that because I could talk about it, I should be able to do it. He was pretty good at boxing. He won the provincial championship and he boxed in the Canada Games. And in the months leading up to his appearance in the Canada Games, I'd take him to most of his training sessions. And at the end of each one, he'd say, "Come on, Dad, get into the ring." He wanted to see what the old man had. I knew this was a loser's game, and so I wisely declined every invitation until one fateful day when Darcy and I went to pick him up at the end of his training session. He was the last one there, so who was going to see it? And I made that decision to glove up and to get into the ring with him. And within 20 seconds, I was bent over against the corner turnbuckle, blows raining down on my kidneys, hoping I'd be passing blood for only 2 weeks. And on the way home, the deepest cut of all, when he turned to me and he said, "You know, Dad, if a criminal broke into our house, I'd have to save us. You couldn't do it." I think a lot of teenagers at one time in their life, teenage men, have that thought that I could take the old man, but in a loving, caring home like ours, why would you have any reason to find out? Bruce had his answer at the age of 15. Rap music. It was a school night in his last year of high school. Anne was out of town visiting a friend, and so I was in charge, and Bruce said to me, "Can I go to the rap battle at the University of Manitoba tonight?" And I said, "Yes, but be home by 10 o'clock. 10 came, no sign of him. 11 came, no sign of him. By midnight, I'm standing at the front door, ready to invoke all manner of punishment. And he comes to the door and disarms me completely by waving in my face 5 fresh $100 bills. And he says, "Look, Dad, I won it all." I said, "Son, that's the way to come home late. Now get to bed."
We never really understood the genre of rap. The lyrics seemed so angry, but he was good at it, and we did what most parents do. We supported it as much as we could. But I should also tell you that Bruce had another passion, and that was basketball. He worked really hard and made the varsity basketball team at his high school, but it was his love of music that consumed him.
And we do have something beautiful by which to remember Bruce's music on the weekend after his passing as part of that tribute that Hockey Night in Canada did to him. Bruce's music got to open the second game of the doubleheader. It's a big deal for any musician when their music is associated with Hockey Night in Canada. And we want to share the opening to the second game with you.
Yeah, They'll Bruce B. Just move with me, y'all. Yeah, come on. Let's go. For me, this is something like a fast-moving game of chess. It takes patience and intelligence to be the best. I've done everything myself, and I'm proud of that. Every rapper wants to rock my flow like a Cadillac. Gotta be the worst case of what's a cursed fate. I make rappers nervous like they on a first date. I wrap my head around the beat like taping hockey sticks. One thing Bruce hates is a cocky.
When you think about it, boxing and rap music are both extreme events, and Bruce was always about testing the margins, and ADHD made him a perfect candidate for that, and then along came drugs. We were never sure when his drug use changed from recreational marijuana to crystal meth and cocaine. He was very adept at secrecy and lying. I guess from there it was not a huge leap to OxyContin and sadly heroin.
Bruce, at that time, was not living at home. We didn't like his lifestyle. He wasn't really trying very hard. He had a few subsistence jobs. That said, we weren't the parents to say, "Go and don't come back until you get it straightened out." We were in touch with Bruce every day, never lost track of him, and we were on him constantly to get some order to his life, to get a job. And over time, we became concerned about the possibility of drug use, and we had said to him repeatedly, "If there's a problem, come to us and we will help you." But at the time, we didn't really know much about the signs of drug use.
So on a February weekend in 2007, we were hit over the head with what a serious problem he had. We were at Scott's parents' home in Nova Scotia, celebrating his mother's 75th birthday, and Bruce called to say he'd been assaulted. He was living in a rental home in the north end of Winnipeg. A gang member with whom he went to school with was using Bruce's house to store a stash of cocaine. He accused Bruce of breaking into the stash and made a number of demands. He wanted $25,000, which really was a veiled threat against us because he knew Bruce didn't have it and that he would have to come to us for the money. And then to show how serious he was, he showed up at Bruce's home with another gang member and beat Bruce with a flash club, breaking his hand, and made him sign over his car. And then another big threat that he would be coming back for more.
We were thousands of kilometers away, so what were we to do? Well, the first thing we did was we got Bruce into a hotel under an assumed name, and Darcy went to stay with him for the 2 nights until we could get home. Then we called in a favor from a family friend who was the lawyer for the Winnipeg Police Service. He got in touch with the head of the gang unit, who called me immediately and said, "Where is your son? We want to put together a detail to go get him and put him into protective custody." That's how serious they took the threat and how badly they wanted to arrest this gang member. we felt that things were spiraling out of control, and so we said to the head of the gang unit, well, let's wait till we get home and we'll bring him in, because we had some concerns about Bruce's health as well. Got home on Monday night. Darcy brought Bruce home. We hadn't seen him for a couple of days, and as soon as we laid eyes on him, we knew that he had a problem far more serious than the assault. He presented all the signs of addiction. He was gaunt, he was emaciated, and as a nurse, identified it immediately, and so off to emergency we went, where we waited for about 7 hours. When the doctor saw Bruce, he identified addiction as the issue immediately and said, you have two choices. I can put you on the waiting list for the government agency, which here is Addictions Foundation of Manitoba, but there's a wait of 4 to 6 weeks then, and probably longer now, or you can pay for private treatment. Because we wanted this problem solved immediately, we of course said, well, we're going to go private. But to go to treatment, you have to be clean or detoxed. And so the doctor wrote a script of Oxy for Bruce to get him through the 7 days until a bed was available in the detox unit of the Health Sciences Center. That's the major hospital here. The next morning, we had an appointment with the detox doctor, who examined Bruce and said, given his addictions, prepare yourself for failure, because this doesn't often work the first time. Of course, we dismissed that out of hand because we were doing everything right. We were throwing money at this problem, and treatment would work the first time, and we would all go back to our happy lives. We still had the police to deal with, and so the following Wednesday, by which time Bruce was feeling better, we went to the police station. Bruce made a statement, and then the concern became for our safety. And so the police put 2 officers in the house around the clock for the 4 days until Bruce could get to detox.
So I had graduated from the Faculty of Nursing in 2004 and was fully invested in my career as a palliative care nurse, while at the same time working on my master's degree. So that weekend, I was working on a key presentation, which I was supposed to present the following Tuesday, but of course I had to postpone. Imagine, so you have 2 police officers around the clock in your house, and your other son, who's never been in trouble, comes home from a Magic Club meeting, walks in through the garage door, and the cops are at the door with their hands on their hips, ready to draw on him. And also, I had to administer Oxycontin to Bruce every 4 hours to keep him from going into withdrawal before he could get to detox. So I was really traumatized by all of these events.
Say a word about the justice system. We put our faith in the Winnipeg Police Service, and our faith was rewarded. Our experience is that when a police force sees a family in trouble trying to do the right thing, they're more inclined to help than to be punitive. Monday morning came, took Bruce to detox, and then the following Friday I took him to a private facility just outside of Toronto. 6 weeks, $25,000. But sadly, the detox doctor was right. This was the start of an odyssey, a 4-year cycle of active addiction, recovery, relapse, and the cycle went on and on. Out of Bellwood, we took Bruce to Halifax. That's where he relocated to. He could not come back to Winnipeg because of safety concerns, and he had a whole new life in the palm of his hands there. He had a car, he had an apartment, he had a job, but sadly in Halifax, it's a port city, and heroin is more easily available there than it is in the interior of Canada, and Bruce relapsed badly and very quickly. A couple more stints in detox and another stint in a private rehab facility just outside of Halifax, and so went the cycle. In 2008, the summer of 2008, I was working on our coverage of the Olympic Games in Beijing, and Bruce had gone completely off the rails, and to her eternal credit, kept it from me because she knew I had to focus on my job there, and besides, what could I do in China? But when I got home, she told me everything, and so we realized that we had reached critical mass, that what we were doing was not working. We had to do something different. And so we sent Bruce a text, because at that point we were having difficulty getting him on the phone. And the message in that text was, we're done giving you any money. No more cash advances, no more rent money, because it's all going into your arm. The best offer you're going to get from us is you get yourself to detox, and we'll try to find a more effective form of treatment for you. Tried for a couple of days to get over on us, but he did go to detox, and he stayed for 8 days.
And so our challenge was to find a long-term treatment, sober living facility, and Simon House in Calgary was heaven sent to us. First of all, it was staffed by people in recovery, so his days of pulling fast ones and getting over on counselors was over. They knew what he was and what he was up to the minute he got there. He had a good year there because of the structure, but he really wanted to move into phase 2 where he would have more freedom. And finally, after 11 months, they moved him into phase 2. Unfortunately, he wasn't ready to handle the new freedom, and he got caught smoking dope and failed a drug test, and Simon House rules are strict, and he had to go.
And so the cycle picked up from there. He came home for Christmas. We knew he was struggling, and when he got back to Calgary, he went through a major relapse, and it was back to detox. A year after he was asked to leave Simon House, he was able to go back. Simon House took him back in, but he only lasted 6 weeks. He failed another drug test and again had to leave.
And Bruce was disheartened by his failure rate, and he went on a major bender. He was back into heroin, and 4 days after he left Simon House, he was dead. When an addict is injecting drugs, every time you use, it's a roll of the dice. You never know how pure it is or what it's laced with. And we believed Bruce's mindset would be that he would have one last run at it and go back to detox. Unfortunately, he never made it. The sad truth is he died in a bathroom stall at his local bar.
Once again, we were visiting my parents in Nova Scotia when we got the call that no parents should ever get. Did the best we could. We went to Calgary to get him. That's when our grief took hold. We still grieve every day. We have holes in our hearts that will never heal, but we tell Bruce's story because we want to make his life mean something. We also tell it because we feel compelled to do what we can to help at least reduce the stigma that so often damns addicts.
On the second anniversary of Bruce's death, I decided to return to Calgary as there was a lot of unfinished business for me. Many of Bruce's friends there I had never met, and I knew there was a lot of grieving and feelings of guilt, in some cases for not trying to help him, and in other cases some of them were using drugs with him when they knew he was trying to recover. But these were Bruce's decisions, and I wanted these young men to move on. When I got there, I was amazed at the outpouring of love for him. They had a huge afternoon rap battle where they had giant posters honoring Bruce, and at least half a dozen guys had Bruce tattoos on their arms or their sides. And they told me some amazing stories about him, for which I was really grateful. The other important thing for me to do was go to the place where he died. Tipperary's is a local sports bar, and Bruce lived close by. So I went with my friend, and we walked in and went up to the bartender, and I said, "Was it anyone working here 2 years ago when a young man died in the bathroom here?" And the bartender said she was there. So I asked her to take me into the bathroom, which she did. And afterwards, my friend and I decided to sit down and have lunch there. And I noticed that there was a man at the bar who kept looking over at us. So when I gave my visa to pay the bill, he came over to the table and said he was the manager there, and he was working the night Bruce died, and he told me every detail. He told me how there was a young waiter who was a paramedic in training that broke into the stall and tried to resuscitate him till the ambulance arrived. And it was such a good feeling for me just to get some closure. And then just to add some levity, that when he brought the bill over, he gave me the manager's discount. We got $8 off our lunch. And if you knew Bruce, he would have found that hilarious.
It's a sad story, but as a family, we do see some humor in that. It's not just Ann and I have holes in our hearts. Darcy does as well. Darcy and Bruce were incredibly close, best friends. In many ways, our story is a tale of two sons. Is it nature or is it nurture? And we're here to say that it's not nurture that caused Bruce's addiction, because our boys were both raised in the same loving home, really as children of privilege. From the age of 10 or 11, all Darcy wanted to be was a famous magician or illusionist, and he has achieved a very good international reputation. And he often honors Bruce in his shows. So we want to share with you a portion of a TV special that Darcy did that aired in Great Britain in 2014.
Who here tonight came with a husband or a wife, a spouse? Who came with a sibling? Who came here with the one person they would call if their car broke down and they could only make one phone call? Who's here with that person? I want to tell you a true story, and it's something that I think about every day. It's about two kids who grew up together. One was a bit older than the other. The older of the two was the alpha. He was larger than life, spontaneous, with a magnetic personality. The younger was a bit more shy, awkward, a little insecure, yet wildly ambitious. They were so different in so many ways that you would never expect the two to be best friends. However, as time went on, the eldest began living fast, while the younger remained focused. The two had similar dreams, yet chose different paths. And suddenly, tragedy struck, and the youngest was alone. My brother Bruce was my best friend.
Wouldn't that be the perfect way to end Bruce's story? But Bruce's story is far from over. Bruce has been dead for over 9 years now, and we remain committed to making his life mean something, and we feel the best way to do that is to be part of the solution. When Bruce died, addiction was already at the crisis stage. Now, we dare say it's a full-blown epidemic. Between January of 2016 and March of 2019, that's just over 3 years, 12,800 Canadians died of opioid-related overdoses. Do the math. That's about 330 a month, or 10 or 11 a day. So how can it not be seen as an epidemic? Not to forget, the meth crisis is tearing holes in the hearts of most cities in North America. And there is, of course, COVID-19. We should be paying attention to that these days, and we are. But we should have the foresight to know that on the other side of this pandemic, the demand for addiction services will be through the roof. We often hear in conversation words like fentanyl, carfentanil, Narcan, meth, naloxone, but the word we don't hear nearly enough of is treatment. And until treatment is made available to the countless addicts who want recovery, but can't get treatment, then nothing in this crisis or epidemic will change. It will continue unabated.
Bruce, as we said earlier, had the best year of his addicted life at Simon House in Calgary, where he didn't have to pay and where he stayed for a year. We remain convinced that if he had stayed for another year, he would still be alive. So long term is the key here. 30 days, 45 days, 90 days, those in the world of addiction recovery for addicts like Bruce is a rinse, wash, and spin dry cycle. Not nearly long enough to equip you with the tools required to avoid relapse.
We were fortunate in that we had the resources to send Bruce to private treatment, but here's what happens to the vast majority of addicts who want treatment and can't get it. First, you would try to get into detox, which in itself could be a major challenge, and if you're successful and you can last the 5, 6, or 7 days, however long it takes, then you're clean. You're not sober, but you're clean and ready for treatment. Where do you go if you can't endure a waiting list at a government agency, which, as I said earlier, could be 4 to 6 weeks or even longer, or if you don't have $500 or $1,000 a day to pay for private treatment? You would despair, probably, and go right back to the life you had before detox, rolling the dice each time you use. And when it's explained that way, how can we not conclude that we are leaving a generation of addicts out there to die? So we want to be part of the solution through the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre.
So the Bruce Oake Memorial Foundation is building a not-for-profit 50-bed recovery center for men with 2 cornerstones. First, it will be long-term. Residents will be able to stay for as long as it takes to get it right, a year, 2, maybe even 3. And no one will be turned away because they can't afford to pay. Those who can't pay will be covered by a combination of social assistance and fundraising. This is how it works at one of the most successful treatment centers in the country, called Fresh Start in Calgary. It's been in existence for 25 years and has an astounding success rate of 55%. We are pleased to say that the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre will be modeled after Fresh Start and will employ its expertise.
And we are very close to achieving our goal. In January of 19, the city and the province came together to gift us a choice piece of property on which the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre is currently being constructed. We launched our capital fundraising campaign last August 22nd, Bruce's birthday, and in 6 months we raised our first $10 million. A couple of weeks ago, the province gave us a grant of $3.5 million. Daily, donations come into our foundation, even during COVID-19. So we see that as the will of the community. The community is voting on the need for the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre. As I say, construction continues on schedule. In 6 months, we have gone from concept to proof of concept. We want to share a bit of the progress with you. We hope you are as impressed with it as we are. Thank you all for being here today in support of the Bruce Oake Recovery Centre, a place where those seeking recovery can stay for as long as it takes to get it right, a place where no one will be turned away because they can't afford to pay, and that is a game changer in the world of addiction recovery, and a place where lives will be saved.
We're hoping to start with the actual construction by the end of this month. So we'll be on site with the piles by the end of January. We are working right now towards the goal of flying hollow core. That hopefully will be happening in the next month or so. So we're working on finishing up the basement, concrete, getting our slab poured, and most of our grade beams are poured, but we have another pour in the next day or so for that.
We think back to all the hurdles that we had to cross to get construction started, debates and votes at City Hall, and we never lost faith that we could get it done, but there were days which we wondered, not if it was worth it, but how much more of this do we have to go through before we can start?
I've spent my life watching projects go up and have always loved them. This one is different. This one has a whole different set of kind of meaning and purpose that feels terrific at many levels.
He liked the limelight, so he would be thrilled to see the two giant signs, future home of Bruce Oake Recovery Center, here on the site, and his name will live forever, and I think he'd be okay with that. So at our current rate of construction, the Bruce Oake Recovery Center will be open for business in just under a year. That would be the business of saving lives. We are that close to the finish line, but actually it's not the finish line. We like to think of it as the start line, the point at which we can begin to save lives. And so we hope you see that there is a way to take your pain and turn it into something good, to give voice to your grief. And of course, we're not suggesting that everybody take on a $60 million project, just that there are a myriad of ways to remember your loved ones. God bless the bereaved families of Ontario, Ottawa chapter, for the work you do and the support you give each other. Thanks for listening. So long for now.